Hello, and welcome to our latest Human Givens Ask the Expert podcast. I'm Julia Wellstead, and I'm part of the Human Givens team. Today, we'll be asking our expert, how can we improve children's behaviour? And we're delighted for this to have Miriam Chachamu as our expert today. Miriam is a family psychotherapist and a Human Givens practitioner and tutor. Over her many years of experience, Miriam has helped numerous children, families, and professionals to understand and overcome behavioural and mental health problems. And she now provides workshops and courses to parents who wish to help their children and adolescents to develop into more rounded adults and fulfil their potential. Her teaching includes understanding and improving children's difficult behaviour, a one-day course which she tutors for our Human Givens College. And Miriam's also the tutor for our OCD one-day course, which is understanding OCD and how to best treat it, our course on demystifying feelings, and our Human Givens supervision course for therapists. She's also the author of How to Calm a Challenging Child, a great book. And she's recently started a YouTube channel for parents called Enjoy Your Children. So wow, that's amazing, Miriam. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for
Hi.
inviting me.
Lovely to hear you, Miriam. And thank you so much for being our expert today. Now, Miriam, we've got loads of questions, but I've got one opening question. Can you tell us more about how you began your work and then how the Human Givens approach has helped you when working with children and adolescents?
Yeah, with pleasure. About 20 years ago, I was looking for a career change, and I came across the Center for Children and for Families, and we were working there with the children that had behavioral difficulties, emotional problems, learning difficulties. And I started working with these children and following the way of the person who established this institution. Her name is Noel Janice Norton, and the approach was called Calmer, Easier, Happier Parenting. And I've started learning from her how to communicate better with children, how and what kind of skills to use in order to get children to be their best. And what happened, what I could see over time was happening, was that some parents really took on to these skills and they run with it and they saw great results. But other parents just couldn't do it consistently over time. So they will do the positive skills, they will be praising their children or doing what we recommended. And then at some point, something happened and they lose their temper, they'll snap, or they become really anxious or very down and depressed. And I was looking for a way to help these parents and also to understand what was going on, because the advice there was excellent. So how come some people just couldn't do it? And I looked around for a while until I got to one of these Human Givens training days. And from that moment on, I was completely hooked. It basically, the penny dropped and it provided everything that I needed more.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. So, for example, just thinking about anger as unmet needs. I know for some of the listeners that may sound quite trivial now, but at the time, I couldn't really make sense of all that. And looking through that lens of needs and resources for the children, for the parent, for the relationship, for the family as a whole, was just what I needed. And this is what I've been doing ever since.
Fantastic, brilliant. Well, I'm sure more about the Human Givens approach will come out during your answers to the questions. So shall we get going? I've got two questions here that sort of go together, so I'll start with those, I think. What do children need in order for them to be their best? And what can I do as a parent to make sure this is happening? And sort of added to that, I suppose, how can we create the perfect home environment to benefit all family members?
Okay, so yes, these questions do tie in together. And the first thing I would say, maybe to the second person who's asked, is please do not strive for perfection.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I may be a bit pedantic about the use of words, but what I see quite a lot is parents are under a lot of pressure these days. I think some years before, children were just playing outdoors. Parents weren't as much involved. They were just fed whatever they were fed, what everybody else was eating. They were running around. And now there's pressure about everything. There's a pressure about what your child is eating, who is mixing with. We don't let them, in most areas of the UK, we don't let them just play out by themselves. And then we've got very, very limited time with them, and we want this time to be really great. And I see lots and lots of parents are completely stressed out by that, and they feel that if they haven't done everything exactly right, then the child's going to be damaged, or the child's not going to fulfill their full potential, and that's a lot of stress. So I would say, first of all, strive for good enough environment for your children, and that good enough is good enough.
That's music to my ears,
So,
certainly.
yes, because I mean, I do see lots and lots of parents getting stressed, and then the children get stressed. Nobody can enjoy family life together when you're just thinking, oh, is this good enough? Am I good enough? In a way, I think maybe we are contributing to it, you know, in our work, the people who work with family, because we do want to help families enjoy each other more, but we need to do it in a more relaxed way, and perfection isn't contributing to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I would say there are two levels where you need to think at. The first level is about understanding your children. Is trying to understand how they think, what they need, just trying to understand their position and their experience. And on top of that, you want to put effective communication skills. So one isn't very good without the other. You can talk about communication skills a lot, but if you don't really understand your child, you're not going to know how to use them, or you're not going to want to use them. But if you only understand your child, but you don't really know how to communicate very effectively, that's not great either. So I would say these are the two areas we need to think of. And we need to balance the needs of everybody in the family. It's not just about parenting your child and forgetting about yourself and about your couple relationship. If you are in a couple relationship, it's about everybody learning to be considerate and understanding of each other.
Yes,
That's
so that's really bringing in the human given's needs for security, for attention, for
for
all the other
sure.
things, isn't it? Yes,
For sure.
connection.
And sometimes in families, it's almost like a battle of whose needs are going to be met first, and whose needs need kind of more of a priority. But we need to move away from this mindset and thinking, you know, how could everybody's needs over time in balance, everybody's needs could be better met.
Yes, lovely. Yes, absolutely. And you've begun to touch on the next two questions actually, which is about communication. Um, can we improve children's behavior through the communication techniques? And what is the key? What is that communicating that enables us to communicate effectively with children?
Yeah. So the answer to the first question is absolutely yes. We can improve the behavior through our communication skills. I mean, actually, there is no other way of improving their behavior.
Of
Um,
course.
that's the only way we can do it. But I wish there was just the one key, you know, like the one thing we could do, and that will sort things out. It's in fact quite a complex picture, and we need to look at it from many angles. But if I had to choose just the one thing, I would say be calm, respond calmly, don't react, don't try to sort out everything in the moment, but take a longer term view and try to kind of progress over time. Don't try to control every situation and make it great. Take your time. And I would also say deal with your own ghosts of the past, because a lot of the times our children would push our buttons and we react from our unmet needs or our unresolved issues from our own past, rather than looking to see them and trying to understand them. So if there was one thing, I would just say that that's the thing to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yes, that's very interesting. And something having brought up 3 children myself, I what I discovered was I communicated slightly differently with each of them. And they communicated with me perhaps differently with each of them, especially as they became adolescents. One, if he asked me to go for a walk with him, I knew there was something coming.
Uh-huh.
And with others it was different.
That's great. And that's because you took the time to get to know each one of your children, their own character and their own kind of needs, or the way that they would communicate with you, because there's no one recipe that's going to suit all. That's my experience as well as a mother,
Yeah.
is that I've got 3 as well. They're adults now, but each one needed different things at different times.
Yes, they're all individual, and
Yeah,
why wouldn't they be?
exactly.
um, okay, on to the next question. How much do toddlers understand about being naughty?
Ooh. Well, the short answer to that is not much. I'll give you the long one though as well.
Okay.
Uh, um, when they do something we don't like, they understand that we're not happy with them because we show them
Yeah.
that. They understand that we're not pleased with what they're doing. But the concept of something kind of offending somebody else or them being naughty isn't something that they can really get. When they're really small, it's as if the whole world is a playground. They're out there to play, and they're little scientists that are trying to understand everything, so they want to stick their little fingers everywhere. They want to taste everything. They want to drop things just to see what kind of noise they make, or to see if they're going to fly up to the ceiling or actually drop to the floor. I mean, all these things that we take for granted, they really want to learn and experience. And of course, we need to keep them safe. And of course, many of these behaviors are not okay, but they don't really understand what it is, what it means to be naughty. They don't understand that other people have got different wants than their own. They don't understand that other people have got feelings that are different from their own. So asking them to be really considerate and to understand things in a complicated way is asking too much.
Yeah. Yeah. So really at that age, and we're by toddlers, we're meaning sort of under 5, under 4, under
I
3.
think toddlers is kind of 2, 3 year olds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, they need to start learning things. They need to start learning about consideration and sharing and taking turns, but they have to do this really, really slowly. And what I find in, especially I think in this country, because I come from elsewhere, that we ask children to behave far too soon. And we ask them, for example, to apologize when they don't understand what sorry means. You say sorry. And then they perceive it as a humiliation rather than understanding really what sorry means and then really wanting to apologize.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of the times we ask them to understand much more than they're capable of. I think in the earlier years, people just used to smack, a little toddler that does something not quite right. We kind of, not we, but people used to smack their toddlers. And now we don't do that anymore. So instead we explain and explain, but a lot of the times these explanations are far, far too complicated for them. So I would
It's
say, yeah, with
it's almost as
toddlers,
if we're explaining it for ourselves, isn't it? Sorry to interrupt there.
yeah,
It
yeah, that's right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's sometimes explaining it for ourselves, and sometimes it's just venting. We're
Yes.
frustrated and there's nothing else we can do. So we speak and speak and speak, and we do it very, very quickly. And um, the toddler just gets the tone of voice saying that we're not happy with them. And they don't always understand why, because their brain isn't developed enough usually to understand why. And if we do this too much, then over time, they're going to start thinking themselves as bad little people or trouble. And we don't really want that.
No.
So with toddlers, it's more about distracting them and reducing temptations. So get the environment safer so that there's less chance of doing something that's naughty. And that will be much more helpful than explaining too much or trying to get them to behave too soon.
Absolutely. And should both parents give the same response to bad behavior?
Well, I mean, there is a short answer to this one, and the short answer is yes. I mean, ideally, you want to be aligned. You may have different styles, but ideally, you want to be aligned on the more important issues. So, if a child does something and one parent tells the child off and the other one laughs, that's kind of not a really great message.
Yeah. So that
If
that kind of good cop, bad cop thing doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, both parents basically need to hold both. They need to hold the understanding and the warmth and the fun, and also the discipline and teaching children to be kind and considerate and well behaved, ideally. Now, this is not easy to do because typically, parents will have different backgrounds and different ideas about how to approach things. So parents need to communicate and sort this out and reach compromises, and if possible not in front of the children,
Yes.
because it's not great for a child to see both parents arguing about that child. I mean,
Yes. Well, I suppose potentially they see a loophole there if they see that the parents aren't. I'm not suggesting a toddler can identify a loophole per se, but if children see that the adults aren't in agreement over something, then the child might then work with that.
yeah, that's right. So some children will go to the parents they perceive as the easiest one, that is more likely to give in, and would ask that parent.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they just get really distressed because their parents are arguing in front of them and they know that they were the cause of this argument. So that is not great. But look, I mean, I'm thinking about my own life. I kind of made myself a parenting expert. And with my husband, it wasn't easy sometimes because I thought I knew exactly what needs to be done. And I've actually learned to be much more modest over the years, because your partner, even if you think you cannot really bridge the gap between you, he must be holding on to something that's important too. And you want to kind of discuss things and think about solutions, think creatively. What could you do differently? What could you do that's going to be a step towards where you want to be? And listen to each other and try and come up with something that you could both live with. And a lot of the times, the person who's, let's say, more of a disciplinarian would love to have more fun and relax a little bit. They don't feel they can do it because they feel the other person isn't holding the discipline at all, or the other way around.
Yes, I see.
So really,
Yes.
you don't. I mean, I'm actually going to release a little video explaining this on Sunday on my YouTube channel, so we can
Yes,
people.
as you've mentioned it, tell us a bit about your YouTube channel. What's
Oh, well, I've realized lately that we don't have that much patience for reading anymore, and that YouTube is a great way to approach people and to get these ideas out there. So I started a channel, and it includes about 5 to 6 minute videos about specific topics. It's either myself talking to the camera or interviewing people, and I've got one, and I'll put some more of role plays with myself and an actor playing a teenager, and just showing everyday situations and what could be done, kind of simplifying ideas. And yeah, I'm actually, if, I know that there are probably going to be more questions that people ask that we could answer today. So people are invited to go there and put a comment with a question, and I will make a video about it.
Ah, that's brilliant. And I think it's
Yeah,
called Enjoy Your Children, is
it's
it? Is
called
that
Enjoy.
how people can find it? Oh,
That's right. Or
fantastic.
you can go to YouTube and search for my name. Um,
Right.
I think
Yes.
there may
Yeah.
be even a possibility of putting a link where the podcast is going to be.
I think
So
so. I'm sure we
yeah,
can do
so
that.
we can
Yes,
do
that's
that,
brilliant.
and that'd be
I,
great.
I did actually watch one or two of them, and they're brilliant, Miriam. They're
Oh,
very
thank you, thank you.
lively, as you are, lively and entertaining and educational. So that's
That's
brilliant.
great. Yeah, it's not. I'm doing it just to get it out there. There's no financial motive to all that. It's just there for people
It's just
to benefit from.
information. Yes, yes. Which actually brings us on to the next question. How should we educate our children about mental health so they know it's okay to not be okay or whatever?
Uh-huh. Well, that's a really important question. um, I think discussing mental health and mental well-being needs to be ongoing. It's not like a conversation you can have with your teenager when you've heard about maybe somebody self-harming, or they tell you about something in distress, and suddenly you need to explain all that to them. I think people need to have the language of feelings built into their lives from a young age. So basically the message is it's okay to feel whatever you feel. Feelings are basically just alarm systems telling us that our needs are not being met. I'll say it again in a minute. I know it could
Okay.
be, I could, feelings are the way that our brain tells us we need to do something. They're motivators, and they motivate us to look into what's not quite right and motivate us to make it better. So usually if you have a strong feeling, a negative feeling, it would usually point to a need that's not being met. And so we can have these conversations about how people feel from a really young age. It should be okay for you to say how you're feeling, for other people to say what they're feeling or they're thinking about things. And that needs to go kind of on. You do that without using psychological jargon. So, I mean, not too long ago, I had a 9-year-old come here with his parents, and he just said to me, "I'm depressed."
Huh.
And
So he'd
after,
learned,
oh,
he'd been told that by somebody else
yeah,
then. We don't
and I've
necessarily
asked him,
know that.
"Oh, yeah, I mean, what makes you think that?" And he said, "Well, I'm sad, and my mom said I was depressed." So that's kind of the thing that we don't really want to do. We don't want to use kind of clinical diagnostic language. We can say, "I'm a little bit down, I feel sad, I'm nervous,"
Yeah.
rather than "I've got an anxiety disorder." And if that is something you can talk about as part of your day-to-day life, then it's much more likely that if your child feels more distressed, he will tell you. Um, you can also talk about the films that you've seen, news items, stories, and just mention that sometimes people feel, life is like that. That sometimes there are challenges, or sometimes we've got problems, and we feel that it's a bit difficult for us. And we reach out for help, and we get over it, and we move on. So I think that's all you need to do really with children. Obviously, if there's something specific that happens in your family or around you, you can discuss it. But don't go too much into, talking to them about suicide or self-harm or something like that. It's just going to scare them. They're just going to freak out.
Yes, yes. And as we know from the very recent news, there's so much on social media about things like suicide and self-harm.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. That's right. So you can say, if we're talking about teenagers now, or children that you think may have been exposed to that, you can say some people are unhappy and they do all kinds of things. And if you feel unhappy, please talk to me. I will do everything I can do to help you. There's a lot that can be done to help.
yeah.
And you can
So
say that sometimes when you feel down, it looks like there's no solution, but there's always a solution. There's always a way forward. and we're going to help you find that. So that's a part of a wider discussion, a part of your whole, kind of the whole idea of having a positive relationship with your child, where people are mindful of each other.
And of course, the importance of communication. It all comes down to communication.
Definitely. I mean, if your child doesn't talk to you at all about anything, they're not unlikely to share and open up to you when something goes wrong for them. So this is just day-to-day communication. Every day we talk about something.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's not one big
absolutely.
conversation or one big thing that you could do.
Okay. Thinking back to labels and not using diagnostic jargon, um, here's a question about OCD. So, and I know, Miriam, you have a course on obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
Um, this is, my child is becoming quite OCD. They have to have all their food in specific places on their plate and do things in a certain order. Should I be worried about that? How do I know if they'll grow out of it or not?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is that you can't really tell. Some children grow out of it, especially if it's only confined to food. But I think from the question, it's not just about food. Um, there are lots of children who are very picky with their food, and then they do grow out of it. But children who are not just picky about food, but tend to be rigid about their lives generally, and like want things in a certain order, such as, like, say, the bedtime routine, um, sometimes can become even more fixated. And so I would say, if the behavior stands in the way of you just enjoying your life, then you want to address it. Um, and um, what happens a lot of the times is, say parents want that the child will only eat the food a certain way, then it's very, very easy to just make it the exact same way, because you know that your child's going to eat it, and you're not going to have a fuss, and you're not going to have battles around your meal times, and he's not going to be late for school. So it's very, very easy to just do what the child asks. But if you do that, the child is actually learning that it's important to arrange the food in the plate in that particular way. And it's
Haha.
important to have this routine just the way he wants them, because you are cooperating with it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so a lot of the times parents don't mean to, but what they do is they start becoming a part of these routines, and these routines can become more and more and more elaborate. So from a child who would say, have a bedtime routine, which people think all children need, not all of them, by the way, need it, but some children need a clear routine. Um, and from a routine that's more flexible and would include maybe going to the, having a bath, brushing your teeth, going to your pajama bedtime story, and a kiss and goodbye, it can become more and more and more elaborate. And the parent would sometimes just um, do some of these steps just to pacify the child, and that doesn't really help.
Yeah.
So I would say it's best to address it, really. And the way to address it is not by suddenly refusing to give the food in this way and doing it completely different, but it's about putting little changes all the time. So did you say that the child wanted a
Uh,
particular plate, or
they
specifically
have to have all their food in specific places on their
placed on?
plate.
So I will start from changing the plate, you know,
Yes.
having a slightly different plate, and then having the food slightly differently, and then maybe adding a little bit of the food that they like with something that they usually wouldn't eat, but just have a very, very, very little piece of it, and
Mm,
not make them to eat it. And you need to be creative and just push them very, very slowly and creatively. and just don't let this rigidity settle, because then it will be very, very hard to shift.
And would you say the rigidity is caused by something, an unsettledness in some other area of
A lot of
their
the times,
life?
yes. I mean, it could be that there's something happening in the child's life, that it could be something at school, it could be something that happened in the family, and they feel out of control and anxious, and the rigidity could be a compensation for that. So at least I can control what's on my plate. At least I can control how I go to bed. Or these are usually the two areas where children are most um, inflexible about. So yes, sometimes it's a sign of that, and there will be some children. By the way, I completely do not know who the person who asked this question is, so I'm not making any
Yes.
assumptions about the that child. But some children who've got some autistic spectrum traits can become very inflexible.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times thinking, well, he's on the spectrum, so he needs his routine, so let's have his routines. But what I'm saying is that yes, you need a little bit of routine, but if it becomes too elaborate and too rigid, then actually the child needs to be trained very, very slowly to become more flexible.
Yes. Yeah.
And you do it with,
And perhaps stability in other areas life of their life will help with that.
of course, of course. um, Whenever there's any mental health concern about a child, you want to basically scan their lives and check to see whether the needs are met in all areas of life. So
Yes.
that
So
that that's very much so. But
that
then
sort of
it doesn't mean that if you find that there's something else that's going not great in their lives, you can't always fix it for them. But it also doesn't mean that you going to let them um, become more and more and more rigid. You need to do both. You need to take care of their emotional needs, and you need to help them be flexible. But I would say the most important thing about um, teaching children to become more flexible is actually teaching them to become more flexible, not demanding it. It's about
yes.
slowly, slowly, and with patience. You want to treat your child the way you want a teacher to treat your child in this area.
Mm.
You
And
wouldn't want to.
I do like that point you've made, that as parents we can actually because we know they like their food in a particular way and it's easier, we can actually further the OCD if we're not careful. I think
Yeah,
that was a very important point. Yeah. But
that's right.
I'm sure you go through much more of this in your obsessive compulsive
Oh, for sure,
disorder
for sure.
training
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Um,
I think there's one coming up pretty soon. I think sometime in March, if I'm not
ah,
mistaken.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, all of our courses can be found on the humangivenscollege.com website. So if you are interested, any of our listeners, have a look at that. Um, Next question, Miriam. My children love watching TV and looking at smartphones and playing computer games. What effects will this have on their mental health?
Okay, so first, I mean, I don't know the Asker's children, and there's no one thing that will happen to all children who like their screens, basically. But I can say what the concerns are and what the benefits are generally for children. And the first thing I want to say is that screens aren't our enemy. It's not that they are here like an invader and we now all need to fight them and get them out of our children's life because there's just danger about them. That is not kind of a wise way to go about it. It's really about balance, and some use of screens, TV, smartphones is great. Um, Usually the problem is that we have too much of it. And what have been shown is that there is a link about between the time people spend on screens and ADHD. Basically, children who are used to the fast pace of social media, TV, watching things, playing computer games, find it much more difficult to concentrate on their studies because
So
you go,
I suppose that it's grabbing our attention all the time in
yeah,
small sound bites, and
that's
that,
right.
and
I mean,
of course that,
a child who's used to the screens, and things are jumping around and there's music and lots of colors and it's fun and you can switch whenever you're bored, you can switch to something else, is going to find it very difficult to concentrate on a teacher explaining something in class. Even if it's primary school and they're all sitting on the carpet and the teacher is showing something, it could be very hard because the teacher can't produce all these sound effects and jump around like the cartoons on TV. So a lot of the time when children are used to too much stimuli, it's hard for them to concentrate. That's one thing.
yeah.
The other thing that I'm seeing lots of teachers complain about is that children get to school with very poor social skills because they haven't had the chance, even with their siblings at home, they haven't had the chance to play together, to share, to fight and make up, to just talk to each other.
Yes, because
Because
they're all on their separate devices,
yeah,
of course.
each family member is on a separate device. By the way, when you talk to children, they usually complain about their parents being on their phone until they get, that's right, until they get their own phone and then they don't care.
Yes. Oh, isn't that
So,
sad? Oh my
but
goodness.
but
Yes.
look, I mean, again, it's a question of balance. It's not about it's all being bad. It's just about balancing some screen time with some time to do other things.
Yes, because there's so much good to be found on.
There's a lot of good stuff, and
Yeah.
also not all screens are the same. When you watch TV, you're just the passive consumer of somebody else who created some content there.
Mm.
But there are lots of computer games that are very creative. There are ones that are played with other children online. So you get some social interaction through that. There are all kinds of sports devices that are also electronic. There's quite a lot going on there. Not everything is the same.
Yes. Yes.
So
So
yeah,
it,
and then the other thing is social media, and is especially being shown about girls, but also with boys to a lesser degree. Is this need to be popular, to get lots of likes for your Instagram pictures, um, to show your best all the time and show the world that you're having this wonderful life. And if we just leave our children to it and we don't mediate it for them, that's not great. So I'd
so
say
again, that's communication, isn't it? You know, if you don't know your child's on social media and feeling down about something, then you can't help.
yeah, that's right. And it's much more difficult now because in the olden days, when I was growing up, the phone was attached to the wall
Yes.
and you picked it up and you didn't know who was at the other side. So your parents usually knew who you were talking to and they could hear your conversation because you're there in that kind of central place. It's very different now. It's far more difficult. And the only ways to keep communicating with our children, to have fun time together, to have some time that the phones aren't active,
Yes.
do some activities together, turn them off or put them on airplane mode or put them in a charger in another room. Um, and,
And of
and I,
course, that includes the parents' phones.
yeah,
So
I think we are
yes.
as guilty.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's not fair to ask our children to be more mature than we are. I mean, if
Good point.
if we can't let go of our mobile phone, how could they? How could we
Yeah.
expect them to do it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So that's really a huge topic. That's a huge area, and I think if we put limits and if we communicate about what we're seeing, then there will be a time that we are going to watch whatever we want to watch or enjoy a computer game, and then we should be allowed to enjoy it and not feel guilty about it.
Exactly. Yes.
If you know that your child's doing a little bit of sport, you walk together to school, you've had a chat, he's done his homework, a few chores, and now he wants to relax and play a computer game. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there are games that certainly my sons could play the games together.
Yeah,
So
yes.
uh, that works as well. So
Yeah, for
m-
sure.
moving on, here's the next one. How can we get children to learn from their mistakes?
Mm. I've got that's an easy one because I've got a little clip about this on my channel.
Ah, fabulous.
It's called
Fabulous.
sorry seems to be the hardest word. I mean, there's a few of them going like three of them, 5 minutes each. But the principle is that you don't tell them off. I mean, that we think sometimes that what we need to do is point out to children what they've done wrong, and then they will be remorseful and will regret it, and they will learn from it. But a lot of the times, what happens is when we point out what they've done wrong. By the way, most of the times they know it already.
Yes.
But if we then point it out, all that happens is that they become defensive. They now feel that they need to defend themselves from your perceived attack, and they are much less likely to learn. So there's a process one can go through with their child. And I think if people want to learn a little bit more about it, they can really go and see this kind of video called "Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word," and that explains what to do, how to get people to why it's so hard for people to apologize and admit their mistakes, and how to move them on from that.
Yes. And again, your YouTube channel is called Enjoy Your Children,
Yeah.
and we can find that there. That's brilliant. I'm going to put the next two questions together, Miriam.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when should a bad child be tested for behavioural problems? And what should I do if I'm worried about my child's behaviour?
Right. Okay. I mean, I'm sure the person didn't mean kind of bad child in that kind of condescending way. I'm sure they've meant basically that the child's behavior is challenging and they're not quite sure whether they should be assessed or tested. I believe this is kind of the question. And okay, so I would say there are kind of several questions you want to ask yourselves. And the first and the most important one is, are his teachers concerned? Is the school concerned, or nursery? Um, if you're if you go and ask the school teacher, your child's class teacher, and the teacher is concerned, then I really suggest you get concerned too. Um, I haven't mentioned that, but in the last, I'll say 5-6 years, I work 2 days a week around primary schools, and I go and observe lots of children with concerns about the behavior. I go and observe them in the classroom, and I do quite a lot of training and insight days for teachers about children's behavior. And what I see sometimes is that the child clearly isn't coping with the school. And
Right.
sometimes parents would say things like, oh, well, he's only 6. Or, I used to be like this when I was a child. I found school difficult. And school doesn't quite understand him. It doesn't really understand my child. But what I'm saying is, if there is this problem, that could be all true. And maybe our school system, I mean, in my view, is asking children to behave and listen and sit still too soon for some children. I accept that.
Yeah.
But still, your child isn't coping at school. It means that there is something there that you need to look at.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
will be my first thing. If you haven't heard from the school, go and ask. If
So
your child
again, it's communication, isn't it? So
Yeah.
in this
If,
case,
if, if
between
your child is challenging at home, go ask the teacher. If the
yeah,
teacher say, well, he's perfect, there's absolutely no problem, that is kind of a good sign. You may want to look at how you are managing your child. But if the teacher's saying to you, actually, there's this and that problem, then please take it seriously and go. I can explain later how to go about it, but say to yourself that you do need to address it. And then the second question I would ask is, does he have friends? I mean, he doesn't need to be the most popular child in the class, but is invited to children's homes, is invited to birthday parties. Does it seem like children want his company? If the answer is yes, then less to worry about. But if the answer is no, again, you want to think, what is going on here?
Yeah, because again, that comes down to the needs, doesn't it? The need for connection with other people.
That's right. But some children are desperate to have friends, but somehow they find making friends or keeping friends quite difficult. Yeah. And so they may need some help. And then I will ask another question, and that is there anything going on or just happened in that child's life? It could be things like having a younger brother born, or because maybe you moved house, maybe there was some medical issue in the family. There could be things of everyday life that are not necessarily, they're not trauma or something really horrible that happens, but they're just transitions in life that maybe the child needs a little bit help with. And again, you can also ask, is there anything major that's happening there that the child's responding or reacting to? Yeah. So yeah. If your child's really happy at school, he's got lots of friends and nothing happened, and you still see this difficult behavior at home, then you may want to look into your parenting skills. If the school is concerned, the school may be able to refer for an assessment. Every school has got a special needs coordinator, and you can get the school to refer for assessment. Typically, children will be assessed for ADHD or for autistic spectrum disorder.
Right. We have a question coming on about that, actually, but just before that, so would you tend to do that? The next question is, should I send my child for counselling or family therapy?
Okay. Can I just say before
of course.
that for the person who's asking what should I do, is first of all, you speak to the teacher if the school may be able to give you ideas or refer on. But if you are still worried and the school hasn't referred, talk to your GP. Right. Because there's help available there. You can access it.
Yeah. So would you do that before going to counselling or family therapy?
I would have a chat to the GP. Yes, why not? Yeah. Yes. And see if there's anything that could be going on there. Yeah, I would.
So to move on to that next question, under what circumstances might you suggest a child goes for counselling, or even the whole family goes for family therapy?
Well, it's a very general question. I don't know how old the child is and what the problem is. I would say generally, in my view, with children who are not yet teenagers or school-age children, when you have a parent who is functioning, it is useful to see somebody as a family first, or for the parents to go and speak to someone first, rather than locate the problem in the child and say, my child now needs counseling. Because it's not that if the child's, again, the question is very general, so I don't know what this is about. But suppose your child is very anxious. Let's take this as an example. It's easy to think I can send my child to counseling and they're going to cure that child and help him with his anxiety, and that will resolve the issue. But it's very rare that a child is anxious without having some anxiety elsewhere in the family. Yes. So he's either learning from one of the parents to be anxious or nervous about something, or he's anxious about, let's say, things that happened at school and the parent doesn't know how to support it.
So better that the parent does a bit of investigating first, rather than
Yeah,
assuming the child needs
that's
therapy.
right. I mean,
Yes.
the way I personally work, and sometimes I do get these phone calls of people asking, "Could you see my child?" I always say, I will first see you,
Yes.
because I want to get a picture of what the background is, what's going on in that child life, and I want to um, do it in a way that isn't going to put the child on the spot, because you don't want to go to someone you don't know with your child and start talking about your problems. Sometimes what happens is the parent just starts blaming the child, saying he's got this problem and he's rude and he's not listening to me, and then the therapist is there sitting and kind of almost cooperating with the parent shouting at the child. Again, I'm not
Yes.
saying that this is anything about the asker of this question. I'm just explaining generally how I think what's
Yes.
the
So
best way
knowing the context is
yeah.
very key.
So I
Yeah.
would think, I don't know what the problem of this person is, but I would say go and check out, look for a recommendation. If there's a human givens psychotherapist in your area that is confident dealing with families or children, that's great.
Yeah.
If not, I mean, family therapy is great. I'm trained in family therapy. It is a very helpful approach that sees everybody in their context. And it's so important for children, because if your child is very anxious, individual counseling is unlikely to happen unless you change your approach as a parent as well. Same about your child having low self-esteem, say. There's no way to build in this kind of this self-esteem in a session if you are criticizing your child without even realizing you're doing it,
Yes.
or
So
think, yeah.
it's making it to do with the whole family rather than the individual.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, it's not that the parents are at fault or anything like that, but because they're the people who spend most of their time with their child, and they're so influential, the parents are really a resource to help the
Mm.
child get over the issues that the child is dealing with.
Yeah.
So I would usually work with the parents first. I would at least see them once, and then you can have joint sessions with the child. Sometimes some children do need some individual sessions. I'm not saying it will never be helpful,
For
but
sure.
I would
Yes.
hesitate just sending somebody to just see a psychotherapist who doesn't particularly communicate with the parents. Everything is confidential. Something is happening once a week in the room, and you know nothing about it. And that just wouldn't be my way.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
that's my take on it. I'm not saying it's the absolute truth.
Moving on, Miriam, to the final question for today, I think, is how can we help children with ADHD?
Okay. I mean, there are lots of children that have got a diagnosis of ADHD, but some of them aren't necessarily diagnosed, but they are very active, very easily distractible. They're risk takers. They don't learn very easily from consequences. And there's a lot you can do to help. But the first thing you need um, to consider is that it's going to be a lifelong learning. It's not something that you could just do it for a little bit and then it's going to resolve itself. So the first thing I would say, just acknowledge and accept and come to terms that this is what your child can do now, and that there may be a big gap between their intelligence, their intellect, their understanding of things, and what you actually see on the ground. So the child will probably know that these and these things are not okay to do, but they just can't help it and they will do it.
Mm.
So I would say, first of all, accept that, and also accept that there will be good days and bad days. Now, Julia, we all have good days and bad days, don't we?
Yes, we do.
But for most of us, the gap between a good day and a bad day isn't that huge. And a part of the profile of children with ADHD is that they've got really good days and really bad days. And so a lot of the times it's very tempting to the parent to say, well, why can't he kind of concentrate on his math? He did it yesterday. So he did it yesterday. He showed me he can do it. So why can't he do it now? But with ADHD, a lot of the times, a part of the profile is that it's kind of uneven. And there will be days that he just can't do it, although he could do it yesterday. It's very difficult to parent a child with ADHD. It's not easy at all.
So it's
First of
something
all,
I said right early on about knowing that each child is individual and different and communicate with them differently. In this case, what I'm hearing is that you have to be sort of on your toes, in a sense, to be able to communicate differently with them according to how they are.
Yeah, but also you need to do it in a relaxed way, because if you are constantly worried about the next thing your child's going to do, you're just going to bring a lot of anxiety to the system. So I think if you accept where your child is and you say, okay, he's got this very active, very lacking in concentration profile, I need to help him. I'm going to take a deep breath. It's going to take me years. So I'm not going to, if you have got that, you don't expect your child to behave really well because they're not going to be able to. You just accept this is what you need to deal with. It's going to take a little bit of the pressure off.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. Second thing, I would say look into your child's nutrition, because a lot of the children with this profile are very, very sensitive to sugar. They're sensitive to additive. Now, most parents with ADHD, most parents with who's got children with ADHD, they know they shouldn't give them Cocoa Pops for breakfast because it's far too sugary. But there's a lot of things that we think are quite healthy and lots of children with ADHD can't tolerate. I'm talking about things like raisins or orange juice. Really look into the nutrition. It's I'm not a nutritionist, but have a look. There's a website called Food for the Brain.
Right, which
And
I think we could put a link to that
yeah, you
probably
can
as
put,
well.
and it's got a
Yeah.
section about ADHD. It could really help. Giving a child with ADHD something sugary or high in carbs and expecting them to behave well is just setting them out for failure. What else? I would say opportunities for physical exertion. Now, a lot of these children are very misleading because they're on the move all the time. But a lot of the times, their motor skills aren't very great. Their what we call gross motor skills, the use of their body could be quite clumsy, and almost all of them haven't got very good control of their hands, fingers. So their handwriting is going to be difficult, like unlegible. And so create opportunities for them to exhaust yourself and to practice their ball skills, running, big movements with their arms, small movements with their hands, pre-handwriting exercise, and make it fun.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Celebrate all that's good about them, because these kids are so much fun. They're creative, they're curious, everything is interesting to them. I mean, the reason they can't concentrate, it's not because they're not interested in their schoolwork, it's because they're interested in everything. They're interested in the teacher's haircut, in the pictures that's on the wall, in somebody that's actually walking along the corridor, in the noise of car making as it goes down the street. So
I assume, I often wonder what happens to children with ADHD when they become grown-ups, but I assume if they're channeled correctly, they can really excel at something.
Oh yes, for sure, because they've got a lot of energy, they've got drive. If they have gone through their childhood and teenage year without breaking their spirit, somebody breaking their spirit, they can be amazing. They can be great business people. They think out of the box. They are very alive. They're interesting people. They're great people to have at a party. So what we want to do is get them through the educational system without breaking their spirit.
Yes.
We need to build into our day the distractibility. So we need to know that everything's going to take longer, not cram too much into a day, because they get distracted. So it takes them longer to organize themselves, help them with the practical strategies. Take a deep breath. You want, again, to think of yourself as a teacher, not rather than think as a parent. You think, how do I want my teacher, my child's teacher, to respond to my child?
Yeah.
And that's how you want to do that.
Fantastic.
You want to do it, yeah. But it's
yes.
hard. Look, there's a lot
It's
more.
hard.
There's
It's a lot. You
more
need.
that I talk about in my courses, and there's a lot more.
Yeah.
But
well, and that brings me on, Miriam, actually, to there are other questions here about self-esteem, about anger, about seeking attention. But all of this, we've really run out of time for today. And you do answer all those questions much more fully in your one-day course.
that's right.
So thank you so much, Miriam, for today. Is there anything else you'd just like to add before we close
Yes,
for the day?
I just want to say, enjoy your children and trust yourself. You know, if you don't have, if you're really worried, go ask someone who knows, you know, who works with children and is experienced. But basically, trust yourself and don't expect perfection. Your child isn't going to be really scarred if you shouted at them once or you lost your temper. It's not how things work. We're talking about balance over a long time.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking the time to answer the questions. It's been fascinating for me, and I'm certainly relieved because I definitely didn't have perfection in my household. So that's a
Neither
relief to
did
know
I.
that's a good thing.
Neither did I.
But I'm
Thank you
sure all
very
of
much
this
for
will
inviting me.
help both parents and children and professionals working with children come to that.
Yes,
So thank you so much. Um,
you're very welcome.
now,
Thank you.
thank you, Miriam. Now, to our listeners, if you'd like to continue learning about children's behaviour, Miriam tutors, as I've said, a one-day course called Understanding and Improving Children's Difficult Behaviour. And in fact, the next time it is coming to London on the 13th of March and the 15th of October this year. So if you'd like to find out more about that or other courses, please visit humangivenscollege.com. And all of our podcasts are now available on SoundCloud, so please follow us there. We do hope you've enjoyed this Ask the Expert podcast. We've got more coming up. But meanwhile, thank you for listening today, and we hope you have a great day. Bye for now.